Hello, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis. Welcome to the first inaugural edition, the premiere of the new Anomaly Archives monthly virtual online meetups. Some of you may have heard about the things going on around the world that have had a lot of people and organizations, institutions having to change up how they do their normal things, their normal everyday operations, their special events, and they're in the flesh, face-to-face get-togethers. And this is another one of those such kind of ripple-affected situations. The Anomaly Archives is a nonprofit here in Austin, Texas, that is a 501c3 scientific anomaly institute focused on the goals and missions of preservation of UFO and anomalous research-related materials, as well as the public education of the public of those archives and the findings by the researchers whose materials we preserve. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host and guest of a sort for today's inaugural show. This is my good friend from the past year or so, just under a year, I guess, Eric Harrelson from Austin, Texas. He's one of the several Anomaly Archives volunteers, and he has volunteered to help me out with this inaugural episode. So how are you doing, Eric?
Oh, not too bad. I mean, considering everything, I'm holding up just fine. Other than spending a lot of time in these few walls here, it's been all right.
Well, I'm glad that you seem happy, safe, and healthy. I, too, am doing the lockdown COVID-19 shelter-in-place fun fest. I'm lucky to be doing as well as I am, and having, thankfully so far, no one real close family or friends having the worst possible repercussions one might have from this situation. So being as lucky as we are, I think it's great that we can do this thing and share with our audience the kinds of activities and materials and ideas and topic areas that the Anomaly Archives has been focused on these past, 18 years?
Oh, wow.
Thereabouts. We founded ourselves in 2003 officially with the state of Texas, and it was about 3 years later, in 2006, when the federal government, in the form of the IRS, recognized our application. So, depending upon where you want to place the nonprofit status, and in fact, it probably really goes back to 2002, when a group of friends and I all met together to discuss my crazy idea of starting a weird book library focused on all these anomalous topics. And it's been a long, strange trip ever since, and it's recently gotten even stranger. Eric, I notice you're wearing a cool shirt that looks like it's Bob.
Yeah, I got Bob Dobbs. I became a Reverend Doctor of the Church of the Subgenius not too awful long ago, a few years ago. For the reason that everybody does it. Friends of mine wanted me to be their officiant at their wedding, and
that's the way to do it.
I decided to not do Church of Satan, even though that's what I was likely going to do, just because it's somebody else's thing and they've got family, and why push it? They're already letting their weird friend do the ceremony. Why push it?
Well, I am wearing.
Oh yeah.
The hide and seek champion T-shirt. I've seen some other.
Man, he's good
with the same idea. Yeah, he's good.
He's real good at it.
Mr. Foot. Hey, Big, how's it going? And in fact, I've got my beverage of choice here, which has you can't probably see it very well, but there's a Loch Ness Monster at the fill line.
Oh yeah, I can see the etch. Really cool. I like it. I don't have a beverage. I guess I drank all mine. It was in a House of Torment coffee cup. If that's fun.
Stay hydrated. So in the past several months, the Anomaly Archives had been moving towards having these monthly meetups at our physical location, just southeast of downtown Austin, Texas, right on the northbound IH-35 frontage road. We're at 55 North IH-35 at the corner of the frontage road and Lambie Streets, right before you hit Holly, which when it hits I-35 becomes River, and that new 6th Street alternative, Rainy Street, high development area. And of course, we share the physical location with a number of other awesome nonprofits, including our landlord, the Extendicare for Kids, which has recently merged with Austin YMCA. So, and there's also our great neighbors that I really miss seeing on a regular basis. CAB, Keep Austin Beautiful, a wonderful nonprofit
Yeah, absolutely.
focused on cleaning up Austin's parks and enabling the citizenry to keep our home clean. So we're in good company there. And we had moved into this physical location at the was it the end of, gosh, now I'm trying to remember. I guess it was the beginning of 2018.
Okay.
And so we are fast approaching our third year, I guess, approaching 2.5 years. And as I say, we had started this monthly meetups, and we were going to do a series of events, and we did one or two of them, including some good friends of mine. I'm trying to think of their pseudonyms: Victor Criterion and I need a something. Gosh, I can't remember the pseudonymous last name, but anyway,
Man, I got to get one of those.
yes, they're very helpful.
Yeah, cool.
Anita and Victor presented to our audience the first Anomaly Adventure Club meetup, and this was a series of meetups that will continue in the future, likely in the near future, using this kind of distance co-locating, teleconferencing technology. Their next one has the date's not been set yet, but they are working hard on it, and it's on the history and lore of zombies. Zombies have really become such a mainstay in the popular culture arena. But I'm sure they're going to have some interesting insights. And their previous lecture was on, and now I'm blanking on the individual's name, but he's a famous adventurer who is funnily known for his Monkey Island, which was an artificially created mountain, or it's a monkey mountain, not island, but it basically had a moat, I think, in the defensive perimeter to keep the monkeys in. But guess what? They escaped.
They're monkeys. They'll do that.
But yeah, anyway, going back more to that time about a year ago when I made your acquaintance, you contacted me through a mutual friend of ours who is involved in a number of cool Austin zine and library-related projects, Jennifer Hecker, and so she put you in contact with me, and you've been volunteering with us ever since. And normally we have open hours, limitedly Thursdays 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And Eric's been one of our regular Saturday volunteers. So really glad to have him here with us. And we're glad that you've joined us here. And of course, these shows are going to be expanding. We're going to have a series of variety of guests. And special events and lectures and so forth. And because, as I say, we're just in the same boat as so many other organizations, like individuals and institutions suffering financially from the situation. We've had to close our physical location due to the constantly shifting shelter-in-place orders, safety precautions, and the building obviously has been closed because of its the mainstay of children and other high-risk people. But we do hope that sometime in the near future we might be able to reopen. And in the meantime, we're going to be doing these kind of virtual events. And we still have our newsletter. You can find out more about us at our website, anomalyarchives.org. And, of course, the YouTube channel that you're watching this on probably, or unless you're watching it through our Facebook page. Either way, there's going to be a lot of more information about our attempts at doing some fundraisers, which I'm hoping can actually be some fun, festive, online telethon type insanity. It may be biting off more than I can chew to try to attempt this, but I got to say, I've seen, seeing the effects of this have been pretty hard on me, just watching so many local venues struggling and so many friends and family struggling with the financial impacts of this, and we are just in the same boat. Sadly, without going into too much detail at this time, the Anomaly Archives has leaned on one source of income for far too long, and that source of income has become threatened by this current work situation. And so we've had to tighten our belts and do some hard decision making, and have in fact broken the lease on a couple of the rooms that we occupied, consolidating our materials as best we can into the main space that we have there at 55 North IX35. But who knows what the future may bring, but we'll have more about that in the near future. Also, before I forget, I just want to say to all the mothers out there, happy early Mother's Day.
Indeed.
This is Mother's Day weekend, and I haven't yet had the chance to speak to my mom this morning or this afternoon, and plan on talking to her today and tomorrow. And but love, respect, and salutations to all out there. Another interesting note I want to get out of the way before we continue is back in February at our last board meeting, we were very excited to announce that our newest board member for the Anomaly Archives nonprofit is former San Antonio Express journalist who's very famous for his writing of Report on Communion. This is the paperback edition of the book that he wrote about the facts behind the most controversial true story. Ed Conroy, I've been acquainted with since the 1990s, when he was a speaker at a little mini conference that friends and cohorts with the then Austin MUFON Mutual UFO Network put on, and I was operating the audio and recording video for that event, and Ed was one of the speakers, and we've been acquaintances ever since. In the last couple of years, have become good friends, and he really sees the value and the worth in the Anomaly Archives, and is going to help us take it to the next level, expand our board of directors, get a strategic plan in place that will go beyond our limited attempts so far. And he's got a lot of contacts, as you know, in the UFO community, as do I, and others that are associated with us, with our organization behind the scenes. So just wanted to get that out. And I was alluding to some of our acquaintance Jennifer Hecker, and her involvement with awesome organizations and events, including yet another one that became affected by this current situation, that being the Austin Archives Bazaar, which was going to happen right around this time. I think it was April 19th was when it was originally scheduled for, but unfortunately, like so much, it got at least temporarily rescheduled. Don't have a new time yet for it. The Anomaly Archives sponsors it whenever we can. We sponsored the last. We were a sponsor, I should say. We weren't the sponsor. We were a sponsor for the last one, and we tabled at that event, and we're very excited to participate. And we've been invited back to participate again, and to give a little longer lecture this time, and to table at that as well. We still want and plan to do that to the best of our ability whenever that finally comes around, but. Really, that's another one of those effects where it's like, God, I can't believe. And there's several other events that I want to at some point touch on that have been affected, but this also reminds me of how you've helped, Eric, in your previous work with the nonprofit Otherworlds Austin Sci-Fi Film Festival, and thanks to your help and the sensitive ear of your comrades. I don't know how to phrase that, but the folks there at Otherworld were nice enough to have us table at the sci-fi conference. Was it October?
December,
right? Okay, yeah. See, time. What a strange concept.
I know.
And we tabled there, and I have a tiny, brief little video clip that of our table there, so don't blink because you'll miss it. And that was one of the quieter moments in between sessions, and where I was just videotaping the table, obviously. But very thankful to have participated. That was a very successful outreach event for the Anomaly Archives, with other volunteers and friends helping out with that. Eric, you want to say something about OWA while we're on the topic?
Oh, absolutely. I started working with OWA, formerly OWA. Instead of Otherworlds Austin, they're Otherworlds Film Festival, so they're OWFF now. Recently, for 6 years the festival's going on. I think the festival goes on. The Otherworlds Festival is a science fiction and horror driven exclusive festival showing short films and feature length films done by strictly independent filmmakers. One of the biggest factors in choosing what would be, when I was programming, what were the biggest factors on choosing the content was whether or not they had distribution. They could have sort of tentative deals, but nothing could be out there and going at the moment. So we didn't do any kind of big, massive films. It was all very, young or just, smaller films and smaller filmmakers. So it was really impressive and really fun to be a part of, to be able to bring those films to people in films that they may never have a chance to see again. And especially if you're science fiction, that having that opportunity is always really fun. This year we'll see what happens with them. I don't know what they're going to be able to do. I've recently stepped down as one of the programmers. Initially it was because I started school and I had a lot of I got all kinds of free time, so I probably didn't, could have continued. But regardless, it's a really good organization. I was really proud to be a part of it. They've done, once you get over the hump of about 5 years, you start to really see what a festival can be. Festivals can be a challenge to run, but that one has always come off really well, and it was always a really good time to do. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a great bunch of attendees. We had some great conversations, met some awesome, wonderful people, and awesome filmmakers and creative people all across the board. And in fact, I think one of y'all's special guests was Nicholas Meyer, who's the author of course, let me see if I can get that there. That's the Adventure of the Peculiar Protocols, and yes, friends, he is talking about those protocols, the anti-Semitic protocols that have sadly so effectively, unfortunately, been used against a population of people in the past, and still even to this day. This is actually one of my volunteers bought this for me. And it's autographed, so it's even better.
Oh, fun.
And this is probably the fastest book I've read in years. I really enjoyed reading it. I read it while I was on vacation, right at the end of last year, before this crazy year 2020 kicked me in the, But man, yeah, OWA was great, and I was excited to be reminded that a few years ago, the Austin premiere of the Ghost Rockets documentary. The folks from the Swedish Archives for UFO Research, who are really the quintessential inspiration for my own Anomaly Archives. They are one of a couple of organizations that I specifically cited in that very first meeting that I mentioned back in 2002, whereby I listed all the organizations that really had instilled in me, this is the way to go about this, or this is the kind of organization we want to strive to be. And AFU, Archives for UFO Research, now actually they're rebranded as Archives for the Unexplained, because like us, we are not strictly a UFO library. That's where the impetus came from, both with them as a group of researchers springing from a local Swedish UFO group over there back in the early 70s to myself being a huge UFO fanatic and interested in all the areas that it touches, and that's the kind of the thing, using the UFO as a focal point for all these other strange phenomena.
Well, I mean, there's so much dovetailing, and there's so many convergence with other anomalous phenomena and UFOs. It's hard to sort of separate them, really. I mean, especially when you're going for something comprehensive insofar as, and also in a library or archive setting, there should be an avoidance of, how do I want to put this? An avoidance of sort of judgment, I guess, kind of insofar as, I mean, I don't want to say too much because you don't want to put out deliberately false or wrong information, but you want to grant access to differing opinions and differing types of information. When something is niche and something is as nebulous, I guess, as the anomalous phenomena, you have to kind of entertain a lot of different angles, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's something that is useful when you begin to study into different phenomena, the branches and the way that it can spread to others is I think is important to acknowledge.
Absolutely, and this gives me a perfect opportunity. Thank you to point out that you are actually involved in library science school.
Yes,
that's a career path that you are going into. I've been in that career path only as a non-professional. I've worked in a variety of libraries environments over the years, but I am technically not accredited as a librarian or information scientist. But we do have on our board of directors former Texas State Library and Archives Commission archivists and and our board of advisors currently employed librarians who work at the Harry Ransom Center at University of Texas, and as we mentioned, with our connections to friends like Jennifer Hecker and Rebecca Elder and so many others in the Austin archives library community, there's a rich fabric here of being that there's a library school here of that interest area, and your point is really important because, like that book that I was just showing by Nicholas Meyer, information can be weaponized. We are seeing it more than ever in these times.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
And I know that that's an area that you've been studying and focusing on for a book that you're working on with a co-author.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that at some point. But,
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Just it's amazing to me. I mean, obviously anything can be the focal point for madness or unstable psychological characters, but it often is used by people who we might characterize that way, but who are actually much more calculating in their use and manipulation of information as a warfare tool. Thus, the arena of psychological warfare and psychological operations. It's not just for advertising and marketing. It's also literally weaponized, though many people and some of my favorite comedians consider advertising and marketing to be exactly that, because of course the father of modern propaganda was also the father of modern advertising and marketing.
I mean, if anybody who's watched Mad Men, you know that the sort of inner workings of you're not selling a product, you're not selling the effects, you're selling the mood, you're selling the feeling, you're selling the what this is supposed to represent to the person who's buying it. What gap will it fill in their life, and what feelings are you supposed to be able to, that you may not be getting from your personal life, that you may not be getting validation, whatever it may be, that you're not getting from the outside world. You can concentrate that into an object, and it's really interesting how powerful that can be,
And there are a number of examples of this throughout UFO history, the history of modern spiritualism and the occult. But that's the topic for a whole other show. And as I alluded to, and please feel free to briefly describe what the area that you're particularly working on that we'll talk about in the near future.
Oh, insofar as my study, I'm basically just I'm doing my sort of program is archives also to and that type of it's like my nuts and bolts. That being said, I do have a lot of graduated with my bachelor's many years ago, and I've just now recently come on and started my my master's program, having not been in the field. Um, I do have some background in some different types of things, and especially with when it comes to preservation and, in particular, information preservation. That's why it really interested me in archives. The importance of preserving not just news articles and Senate meetings and these types of things, but also just culturally, just the preservation. When you think about especially now in the digital age, we have so much information out there at all times available. And I'm not just talking about what you can access online. I'm talking about what you leave online, emails, text messages, all these different types of information. But there's also so much that is lost when you do a big conversion like that. So if you consider just in the realm of entertainment, we were talking about film. If you consider what is just lost to time now because we have been unable to preserve those things because of changes in format and, dating way back to, the original celluloid film was incredibly volatile and combustive. So there's just millions of things millions, maybe thousands anyway, of artworks that are just unavailable, are just lost to time. And every time there's a conversion in standard, there's a loss of a lot of different things. So preservation in that manner, preservation of material, research material that's available, just as a historian in general, just knowing the temperature of the culture at a particular time is interesting and useful. Just even in putting that in context of any type of research that you may be doing, if you're doing sort of modern nuts and bolts UFO research, it's important to know how those, how the more esoteric and different types of knowledge were portrayed throughout not just recent history, but also, back further as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you say resonates with me on such a personal level from my day job. Oops, excuse me. And before I continue, I should also just say, please pardon any technical difficulties. I know I'm hearing some of our streaming is breaking up, and I appreciate the comments from dedicated friends and listeners who chimed in. But we'll improve with time. Don't worry. But it really does resonate with me what you're saying, because as I say, in my day job, I work for a government program that provides free alternative reading materials, particularly audiobooks for the blind and print disabled. And in the course of my career there, which never was intended to be a career, but that's what it's become, and hey, very happy. But the conversion just from analog to digital, it may have taken our program a huge long time to do that, but we are still in the process of converting thousands of audiobooks into the digital realm. And as much as I respect and recognize the decisions that led to this process, and it had to happen, I saw the writing on the wall when it started, and I've seen the writing that's still on the wall, which is that it created a digital divide. And considering that in any given circumstance, you may have populations who don't have as easy access to the things that you think, oh, this will make it easy for everybody to access. That ain't always the case. And I'm also reminded of so many awesome Austin nonprofits, like AFS, Austin Film Society, and others, the AGFA Society, and all these that are trying to preserve exactly that, this film stock that's being destroyed through time and sometimes improper storage, or just
it just expires. It just
like the physical
deteriorates.
form, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, time
thermodynamics.
yeah, time punishes us all. So I mean, but in particular, you know, format conversion, but also material too, is, you know, I originally considered trying to focus in on sort of film preservation because I do have a little bit of a background with film. I've done some, you know, not a whole lot. I don't want to oversell myself here, but I've worked for movie theaters and I've done a little bit of projection, and I sort of grasp the different, the importance, not just the if I'm your film, and like, you kind of understand how to make it work. But I considered specializing in something like that. However, it is when you specialize so narrow like that, you do kind of limit your abilities. You limit your ability to, you know, find work or just find something that you can actually with which you can contribute. So, but it's interesting that you mentioned, you know, just mentioning preservation and mentioning those different things. Like, you don't think about. There's an alarming statistic. I want to say, I don't remember it exactly, but it's something like, even now, we're still like a third of the U.S. population just doesn't have access to the internet. I mean, you think about these things that we take for granted that we have every day. You know, we've got phones in our pocket that have access to the internet right now at all times, and we have all this digital, you know, all this digital information that zips up and back and forth. You know, I got 15 different streaming services on my television and all these different things. But when you consider that there's still major parts, large swaths of America that just don't have access to that, either because of, you know, financial concerns or because of infrastructure concerns. There's just those, you know, the sort of conversion in that way and the sort of availability of digital information and the flow. It still is really important. Like, it's really important to be aware of that and to try to preserve and make available those resources. And that's why, in my opinion, you know, libraries are so incredibly important, and especially something that, you know, something like we do with the Anomaly Archive, something so esoteric and you know, I guess, for lack of a better word, narrow, but kind of genre. It's important because a lot of those books may or may not make it into the large preservation projects that are, say, Library of Congress or other major library publications. You may not be able to have that type of material preserved. And I think that's it. You know, I think that's.
Yeah, it's, I won't name the researcher, but there's a researcher who's a friend and writes a lot of material and does great work, I think. And he posted online in response to some of the news articles from this past year. This past year, we've seen an amazing mainstreaming of actual UFO archives. It's been with the passing of nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman, the UFO researcher who had been lecturing forever and ever. Great, sweet guy. Gave probably more UFO lectures than anybody else out there. He passed away, and thankfully he had secured he was Canadian and had secured a local archive and library to take on his material. And believe me, it was one of the least organized, most chaotic collections out there. It's kind of, there's some legendary photos showing showing that. Oh, before I gotta here acknowledge. Hey Carlos, yes.
That's right.
Thank you, Carlos. Carlos, good friend, long time listener to everything I've been up to all these years now. But yeah, this person was like saying, oh, I think it's more, people get all hung up on it's more about nostalgia because they want to, you know, look at these materials. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, I know you have benefited from several specific UFO related archives and just archives in general where he has done his research. And it's like, I get what he's saying, and this person was also talking about how he doesn't even keep his own materials because everything goes into his book. And I'm thinking to myself, so are you saying that you would delete? And maybe he's.
I think that's just traffic noise from out my window. I mean,
it's about to hit your.
I mean, everything's locked up. I think it was a garbage truck going down the freeway. So.
But he was, I was just thinking. So okay, I know this person's conducted audio interviews of people, and while you may transcribe that and say that, oh, okay, everything I do is in your book. If that audio is not in the book, which of course it's not, it's paper, there is something to be said about hearing the original recording, hearing the inflection in an interviewee's voice and that sort of thing. But these are obvious, and I know that he would concede those issues. But yeah, it was amazing last year watching this unfold as not just Stanton Friedman's archives, but still living Canadian researcher Chris Rakowski, who's a professor and UFO researcher of much repute. Chris Rakowski is one of the contributors of this UFO anthology, of which I am also a contributor, and he's more conservative, and his essay in that book is all about belief and how that is really what. The easiest thing to study in these phenomena, besides trying to go behind the how and the why and the mechanisms, is the social aspect. And I know that that's an area that you and I talked about a lot. But
absolutely,
Chris is he's donating his collection to a community university there. Another conspiracy researcher, a friend of mine, Ken Thomas, who used to publish Steam Shovel Press. He actually he's going to be a guest at some point. He's an archivist, or he used to work in the archives. He's since retired, and he's donating his collection. I believe it's to the same university at which he worked, which is that's, you got that connection, use it.
Hey,
and that's really what this all comes down to. Is as much as I would say, oh, please give us your archives, all you researchers out there, and that's definitely something we want to encourage. It doesn't have to be us. Just be sure to help ensure the preservation, the archiving of your research materials,
and that can be something that, there's also some alarming statistics when it comes to archiving in general and in relation to sort of collections and backlogs. The vast majority of archives, whether it be university, privately run, publicly owned, whatever, are way behind in their ability to process. That's a funding problem for the most part. It does become a bit of a standards problem as well. You have to figure, depending on how long you want to take something to process. I mean, if you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of cubic feet of material, it's going to take forever to process. It just is. Unless you're able to throw lots of money at it, which means lots of people. And unfortunately, the current state of our socioeconomic situation is we very rarely are funding projects like that. We very rarely fund schools. We very rarely fund libraries. And it's just something that if you're a researcher or someone who's utilizes a lot of archives, something you can really do is just lobby and help locate donors, not donors of archives, donors of funding, and other things you can help with different archives, because we are not alone in the boat that there's just we have a lot of collections to go through, and we have a lot of work that needs to be done, and that's just across the board. I mean, especially now with the assumption that everything can be found online. The drive is to try and convert all of that to digital, to try to put everything available, on the sort of library website and whatnot. And that's just not possible in the vast majority of collections. There's just so much material you couldn't possibly expect it to be available just with a click of a button. But if you look at something like, there's a lot of great work that can be done. If you want to talk about local archives too, the Harry Ransom Center has done some amazing things. And if you look at something like their Aleister Crowley collection, they have a lot of really great material there that's arranged really well. But that's unfortunately a lot of that material like that is sitting in boxes in places that you just don't have the funding or time or priority to get to. So something that you can think about is patronizing those places and going outside of just looking online to try to find your article or find your resource, taking the time when we're able to go back, go into these places physically and talk to, just email the archivist, talk to them about, what do you want to know about them? Can you come in, set up an appointment to view some of the material? There's just so much you can get by going through the material, even just being in contact with the material, more so than you can by trying to research something with just, standard Google searches and a few university websites. At least I think there is anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I because I know so many researchers, I hear all the time about, I went to the Clarksburg, Virginia, Gray Barker collection, or I went to this university where they've got Professor J. Allen Hynek's materials, and this, that, or the other. One of the resources that we have on the anomalyarchives.org website is a list of other anomalous-oriented archives around the world. There are so many. They're not all grouped in one place. I mean, or again, Archives for UFO or Archives for the Unexplained in Sweden. They are the biggest and the best, but they're over in Sweden, and I haven't made it there yet. But you mentioned the other archives and struggling. Yeah, I remember hearing so much in the archives community and the library community that you've got to, if you're going to take on some collection, you better have the money to fund its processing.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
long-term housing, because it has to be climate controlled. All those things have to be taken into consideration, and it does take human hours to put that stuff
absolutely
into a cohesive, accessible way. I'm showing on the screen here. This was the event that is yet another that's been affected. This was going to be at the end of the year, October, November, at Rice University. Jeff Kripal, one of the academics in the religious studies realm, who has really been raising the sea level when it comes to making the study of the anomalous and UFO-related subjects much more respectable. And he, not too long ago, started collecting and founded this Archives of the Impossible over at Rice University in Houston, Texas. And they were going to have their big launch at the end of the year, and I was lucky enough to be invited to participate in a panel discussion, and they were going to put me up for the weekend and help pay my way. And guess what?
Unfortunately, yeah.
It may or may not it's probably going to get rescheduled, but they're like everybody, they're unsure of how far out should we start planning, and they're a university, so they're affected by tuition loss and the loss in revenue that this current crisis has created, and they may not be able to fund me anymore. I mean, I'll go no matter what.
Yeah.
Really, it's a great thing, and it's so amazing, and it makes me feel much honor to know that Texas was really, representing when it comes to the anomalous.
Well, this particular archive is something that I've been aware of for a little while, and something that I need to, since everything's been going kind of haywire, I've been a little bit reticent about reaching out to people, but I need to reach out to Professor Kripal and see, just to see how he's doing down there and see if I can, lend my assistance in any way. He's a friend of mine, and you mentioned earlier that I've been kind of researching a book project, been helping, trying to get something going with a friend of mine who's a professor at Texas State, a professor of religious studies at Texas State. So he actually has a bit of a relationship with Professor Kripal, and this, they're both religious studies professors. Thank you, William. They're both religious studies professors, and my friend Professor Laycock, Joe, he specializes in the new and emergent religions is his kind of title, but he deals a lot with cults, and in particular, his past few books have been a lot about Satanism. But being that there's a lot of crossover with Professor Kreipel and the his archive of the impossible, he and Joe have some interaction and have definitely share some commonality and some common interest. And I really want to get down and see that collection. I think it's really neat. So I'm gonna volunteer my time and see if he'll take me as an intern, but we'll see.
Yeah. Good luck with that. And I'll give you a great reference. I have had very limited interaction with Jeff, but am thankfully in contact with him, largely due to that new board member and friend Ed Conroy that I mentioned, and others. But he and Jeff Kreipel and Diana Pasulka with North Carolina University, they're doing great stuff. Like I say, they're really raising the bar when it comes to the respectability of these subjects in the soft science arena. While there's this push in the more physical, militarized aspect of it with the long TTSA to the Stars Academy stuff, which we were going to probably touch on at some point, but I don't know if we're going to get to that. What was the other thing I was going to mention? Among the other, since I'm thinking about among the other things, right before all this happened, when we had to at the very last minute cancel I forget which month it was now. But we had to cancel one of our, I guess it was our second or third Anomaly monthly meetup. And later that same day, I was planning on doing our presentation and then running to downtown where a organization called Spacecom was putting on the Spacecom Expo. And it was a multi-day event with a variety of interesting space exploration, science-oriented speakers. But none of that, that all interests me. But what it really interested me was the presentation that was going to happen from Austin's own interesting person of much repute, and that being Dr. Hal Puthoff. And let me see. So Hal, this was the description from the Spacecom website, and his was going to be a panel discussion with some other fellow who I didn't recognize immediately. But when I saw Hal's name, I was like, I'm going to be there. He's actually, he's also very friendly and tends to respond to email requests. But so he's one of the To the Stars Academy speakers. He's famous, most famous probably for his work at Stanford Research Institute in the 1970s, where he was doing the psychic remote viewing research. As it turns out, years later, we discover in the early mid-90s that it was being financed, at least in part, by the military-industrial complex and the intelligence agencies, and they were trying to explore the use of psychic remote viewing for espionage purposes. But he was, of course, he's now more associated, perhaps, with the Tom DeLonge group, TTSA, To the Stars Academy, and it basically says here, Puthoff regularly serves various corporations, NASA, and the DoD and intelligence communities as advisor on leading-edge technologies and future technology trends, as revealed in the New York Times and other major media in 2017 onward. As part of this activity, Puthoff has been a contractor senior advisor to the DoD's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. That's ATIP. That's the program that was outed in December of 2017 by those New York Times and other reporters. I've had the pleasure of speaking to one of the original journalists who did that initial news reporting, Ralph Blumenthal, for the New York Times. And as much as I respect the fellow, I just, it's frustrating because, okay, supposedly these are, professional researchers who have, vetted all this information for us as the public before they reported on it. And yet, it's in some. If you go to theanomalyarchives.org, you can find the link to our Anomaly Archives Flipboard magazine. That's, I think, flipboard.com, and the URL is really long and has some crazy characters at the end. But you can find the link, and I'll post some links to recent relevant articles related to this. Those Navy UFO videos that have been so much discussed since they came out in December 2017. But my criticism of the mainstream media in this part is simply just because they have left it up to individual researchers to try to drag out the trail of provenance of how these videos came to exist, whether to show that they were in fact verifiably from the Navy as promulgated by DeLong's TTSA. That after all this time just finally happens with the Navy saying, yes, we acknowledge those are actual videos. I mean, they'd acknowledged them before, but they hadn't acknowledged that they had released them or really commented on them other than to say, yes, they're real, and yes, we don't know what's in them. But everything about the revelations of this program have had the air of, should I trust everything these people are telling me? And as anybody who knows me knows, I'm like, no. I mean, that's not to say that these people aren't trustworthy. I believe a lot of these people are good and honest people, even if they are within the military intelligence complex. But because those aren't all bad people. So just like all government isn't bad. Anyway, there's so much more that you can, interesting news links you can find at that Flipboard link, and we encourage you to do so. We're fast approaching the top of the hour, Eric, and I know originally these meetings in person were supposed to be a window of potentially up to 2 hours. I don't think we're going to go that long today. I did have a video or two, or I had something else I could play here at the end that would give folks, it's nothing new. I mean, this is actually something that you could have seen if you went over to our YouTube channel. But let's see. So, back, a lot of this started for me in 2001 when I was putting on the National UFO Conference, the 38th annual National UFO Conference in September 2001. But unfortunately, if some of you remember, there were some global earth-shattering events that year in September of 2001, and the conference that was scheduled to be here that I was hosting and organizing at the 3-day, 3-night event at the Alamo Draft House, the original location before they were franchised and had locations everywhere and had revolutionized the eating and movie watching experience. That came to pass, and then it was out of the ashes of that a local upstart newspaper started that I was editing called Austin Para-Times, and then it was out of not the ashes of that, but out of that I finally was like, you know what, this is just distracting me from what I really want to do. Found the nonprofit Anomaly Archives. Well, in the years before that 2001 National UFO Conference, this National UFO Conference would move from state to state, city to city, over time. Pretty much wherever there was a sucker who would take on responsibility for hosting it. That was me that year.
Yeah, I can see that.
Strangely, the 2 previous years, it had also been hosted in Texas. So this was going to be the 3rd year in a row. So in 1999, it was in San Antonio. In 2000, it was in Corpus Christi. And in 2001, it was to be in Austin. Unfortunately, I had to cancel, and it ended up being hosted in a kind of alternate form by a fellow up in the Northeast who already had another conference that he was going to do that was easier to do because it was just... I was flying people in from around the country and from overseas, and no planes were flying.
Yeah.
Similar to the current situation as far as the impact on aviation. But going back to 1999, I had attended the NUFOC conference that was in San Antonio. That's my birth town. That's where I've got a lot of family and friends in the UFO scene who were putting on this this event. And not too long ago, I dug out the flyer for that 1999 National UFO Conference event, and also I decided to take a couple of photographs of it. It's of course it's in the archives. It also has been scanned with high fidelity scanning equipment, and it's in climate controlled conditions. Don't you worry. But I also had what convinced me to put it into a video form and put it on our YouTube channel was the fact that I had also stumbled upon some video footage that I forgot I had because it was on an unlabeled VHS tape. And I heard some statistic from one of the VHS documentaries about something like, some huge percentage of everything released on videotape, VHS particularly, has never been put out in any other format, hasn't been digitized. So there again is the chance for preservation. Well, this particular tape was of a local newscast covering that conference. And there's a shot. So the first part of the video is me just kind of panning over the flyer, so you can get a sense of what a UFO flyer in Texas might have looked like in 1999, 10 years ago. And then the second part of the video is the actual newscast, straight from VHS tape, so it's not the best quality. And then in the audience, I'm actually in the audience. I won't bother pointing out where, but it's interesting to reflect back on how things have changed, and like you said earlier, to get a flavor for the temperature of the time.
Yep.
And I guess with that, we'll probably just end the show with that as a rollout. But before I play this final video for the ending of today's launch of the new monthly Anomaly Archives virtual meetup, Eric, any other final things you want to comment on, or things that you might want to talk about in the future? Or
I mean, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show. It's been really fun. I've really enjoyed, just kind of talking and having a little bit of a personal interaction when you're stuck in the four walls is always a good thing. And, I've been trying to watch a lot more and just kind of interact with people a lot more. I think it's really healthy to do that. I would say, to anybody out there who's listening is interested in these kind of things, if you have the time, volunteer it. The best thing you can do, we talk a lot about funding and, we need this and you need that and you need all this power. But one of the best things you can do is just lend your elbow grease, lend your manpower to it, because those few hours that time is, it costs money to pay somebody to do something. And if you have the opportunity and you're interested in this material and you want to, help volunteer, you'd be amazed at what people will allow you to do if you don't ask to be paid for it. You would be amazed at the amount of connections, the amount of things you can do to really kind of zero in, really help you explore some of your personal interest. And I guess my other the other piece of advice is, even if you don't want to volunteer, go visit the places, go in person. If you have questions, if you have interests, if you're curious, if you want to learn more, just go visit. You go visit any archivist, any librarian. They have access to material you just can't get it online. You can't get it through Amazon. You can't get it through Kubo. You can't get it on these different platforms. There's stuff that just exists in physical copy in a singular location, or just hasn't been deemed necessary to reproduce for whatever reason. Go visit, go take some time, take time out of your day and go visit a place, go do some looking around, do some poking, because the more interest that people have, the more they go and the more they express that interest, the more we can do. The more we can do as archivists and librarians, the more funding we'll have, the more value that we can represent to the people who hold the purse strings. So yeah, come see us, say hi. The Austin History Center, I volunteer for the Austin History Center as well. The amount of collection, Miles, we were talking about interviews and such. There are interviews from the 1960s featuring I can't remember his name, but the founder of Threadgills, which just recently here in Austin, Texas, was a long-term local restaurant / music venue responsible for a lot of the Austin music scene back in the 60s and 70s. In particular, Janis Joplin got her start performing there quite a bit. But interviews with him and hearing him talk about these things in his own words on a recording is fantastic. And there are so many different things are available in every single city you live in every single town. If you're interested in any, it doesn't even have to be the anomalous weird stuff like we like. Just regular old history is go and try to either volunteer time or look through some of the stuff.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for that. And thank you for joining me, Eric, and for the audience members. Stay tuned to the anomalyarchives.org website. We've got a Twitter account. We've got a Instagram account. We've got a Facebook page. We've got a Facebook group. We've got a Tumblr account. We've got a Pinterest. What the hell's a Pinterest? And all the other things. So you can tune in whatever way you like, and we'll be expanding this content generation as we move forward. So thank you so much. We're going to roll it out with that 1999 NUFOC in San Antonio flyer and local news coverage footage for you before we sign off here. So thank you all. And
yeah, thank you. And thank you, Ross. Thanks for having me. I was really enjoyed this.
Me too. Have a good one.
You too.
Fleshy robots.
This is no sci-fi convention. People from near and far meeting in San Antonio this weekend for the 36th Annual National UFO Conference. The people who attend this convention see UFOs, aliens, and abduction cases as no laughing matter. This guest is talking about the Alien Horde, a field guide approach to the unknown.
Now, there are a lot of issues.
It sounds out of this world, but these people truly believe. Some even claim they are the victims of alien abduction. Mary Ailshire is from Austin.
I would like to meet other survivors. I want to get a support group. It's too hard for us to do this all by ourselves.
Constance Clear is a San Antonio psychotherapist and author. She says her book is about 7 Texans who have been abducted by aliens, real-life people she's treated.
I started a group for them. It's been meeting 3 years, going on our 4th year. And that was the best thing I could have done, is get them together, because all of them had doubted their own sanity. And after meeting each other, okay, well, they're not crazy.
Theories abound on what the UFO phenomena is all about. Kevin Randall has an alternative theory on abductions.
That they're not alien in nature, but they're a combination of various other mundane things, such as sleep paralysis, vivid dreams, and just wishful thinking on the parts of many people.
Well, you don't think this is serious yet? Well, some people pay up to $60 for a chance to attend this 2-day conference. A small price to pay for people who believe the truth is out there. Mark Austin, KSAT 12 News.